So you sound very British today, by the way.
Oh, really? I shall have to go and have some tea then.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the RMW Rock My World podcast. I'm Tony Fennell, and with me today I've got my two fellow rock and roll musketeers. In Chicago, we've got Mr. Chuck Masak. How are you, mate?
I am doing splendid today.
Lovely. And of course, across the pond in Leeds in England, we've got Mr. Mike Litson. How are you, dude?
Not bad at all.
Lovely. Let's not mess around. Let's get into it. The question we're going to be asking today is, will there be another major label like the established CBS's, Warner Brothers, or EMIs of the world? Here's an interesting stat for you. In 2017, according to a report backed by the US music trade group, the RIAA, major record companies signed a total of, and hold on to your hats here, boys, 658 acts. And this number was up 12% compared to 2014. So here's the bottom line. In 2019, it works out that major record companies, meaning Universal, Sony, and Warner, are signing close to somewhere of an average of 2 artists per day, which is mind-blowing. Also, another stat from 2017 shows that globally, those same record companies spent, and here we go again, $4.1 billion on A&R that year. This works out to be approximately $11 million a day. Now, does that sound like economic sense to you? Because it doesn't to me. Maybe they're afraid of the indies having too much of the market share. What do you think, Chuck? Are they nuts or what?
I don't know where they're putting that money. I don't see that many artists coming out. I mean, I've been in the business for 40 years, and I know they have tons of artists we never hear about.
Yeah.
You know, but that seems like an astronomical amount of cash.
Well, in 2017, signing 658 acts. Back in the day, it used to be that you'd be on the back of... So if Madonna was doing well, what they basically do is they go, all right, she's bringing a load of cash in. Let's go out and sign another load of bands. That was in the 80s. Just like you just said, Chuck, where on earth are those bands? Mike, I mean...
I'm guessing some of it's got to be international, right? Because, I mean, we're talking things like Universal and stuff. You know, they have smaller operations, you know, in other countries, don't they? So, you know, You might end up with something in, I don't know, Hungarian, which we're never going to come across. Well, so there's got to be a bit of that.
Yes, but I mean, this is the RIAA, which is obviously the US. So I
is it solely the US?
I think I'm dealing with the US, with US companies here. I mean, I may be wrong. The thing is, there are a million subsidiaries of those big labels they call them the big.
Yeah, are they including the P&D deal labels and all the indies that actually have a pressing and distribution deal through the major?
Well, they may well be, but I mean, let's face facts. What I thought these labels were dead and buried. I really did. I thought, with the advent of indie, I mean, real indie. I'm not talking about the old school indies, and I can touch on some of those. Some of the biggest indie labels of all time. Stiff. They had Elvis Costello, The Damned, The Pogues, Rough Trade, The Smiths, The Strokes. Factory had Joy Division, Happy Mondays. Mute had Depeche Mode and Nick Cave. Creation, they had Oasis. And by the way, guys, notice the very British theme going on here.
Yeah, and you're right.
Right? And then, of course, we've got the very US-based Sub Pop, which had Nirvana, etc. Now, they were almost like majors when they started to actually put product out, because they were kicking serious backside. I just thought that the big labels are dead, but how are they spending that amount of cash? Somebody help me out here, because I'm losing my mind.
I mean, what does the majors bring you? I mean, back in the day, there was probably 3 major things that a label did, and the main one was physical product.
Yeah.
Distribution and manufacturing, which is such a small percentage now. And the 2, marketing clout. And, they had a lot of money and marketing dollars to promote their artists in whatever media it was, in print, radio. And then their radio programming directors, at the labels that would push out to radio, which probably still plays a decent part in getting a major label deal.
Yeah.
Those things are not so important.
No, and I honestly thought that those 3 were basically like shells that would be a good licensing deal. So you go, Chuck and I and Mike come up with the album, The Three Musketeers of Rock and Roll, and we license our album through Sony, Warner's, Universal, whoever it is. I thought basically that's what they were. They were just shelves.
You mean the sign and shelf?
Well, no. They had licensing deals, and as Chuck just said, they had good A&R, meaning they had a good rapport with the radio stations. So you go, hey, we've got a chance here. We sign with these, so it'll be our label, which is called RMW Records / Warner Brothers. Now, I thought that that's really what they were about, but I think originally those massive labels were basically, and forgive me if I'm wrong, guys, they were just banks because none of us had the money to go and record albums. So what did we do? We went and got a loan. We didn't get it from Chase Manhattan Bank or Barclays. We got it from EMI or Universal or Sony. And let me tell you, they charged interest.
Ultimately. Well, this is the interesting thing with this. Now in like the era of self-production, there's been some other sort of semi-predatory practices in the industry over the years. I remember this is going back some time now. Back when I was doing promotion, I was talking to a band called 1000 Hertz. Now you probably won't know who they are, and the label they signed to is probably why. They were on the up and up. They just had their 5-star review in Kerrang magazine. They were getting a little bit of TV time, and they'd gone and produced the album entirely themselves.
Right.
The label signed them. Basically then took 90% of what they made in any sale and did absolutely nothing to help them, to the point that when they were going and doing shows, they were sort of doing it as under the radar as possible because the label would take that as well, even though they were given no money.
Well, that's part of the 360 deal.
Yeah,
but it's weird that if they did the 360 deal and got no advance up front, then that's poo-poo on their lawyer for letting them sign that deal.
This is the thing, isn't it? You're grabbing up-and-coming artists when you do that just want to be signed. It's I don't think people are quite as dumb about it now, but this is talking about the 2010 era kind of thing. When you're just coming off the back of the MySpace collapse and stuff like that, whereas being signed was a big thing before. I think it was pre-Enter Shikari actually going out there and getting a #1 as an unsigned artist, which was just unheard of.
Well, you take that back 10 years, Mike, to when Chuck and I were, I think we were about 6 years old then, right, Chuck? Sorry.
Yeah, something like that.
Kind of. You take that same ethos where record companies were like, got to get one. So you got Guns N' Roses. 1,000 bands were signed like Guns N' Roses. You had Poison. 1,000 bands were signed that sounded just like Poison. Were they any good? Probably not, but you could flood the market. And why could they do it? Because they had the money. The record labels have the cash, and they just go, well, I have one of those. It's like kids in a candy store. One of them, one of them, one of them. What do you think, Chuck?
Well, in the 80s, because what happened with the record, you got to remember something, man. Back in the 40s, 50s, even early 60s, most labels were independent labels.
Yep.
And then in the 80s, when the conglomerates started buying up, you had Seagram's buying Geffen Music Group.
Oh, yeah.
And and Warner, the Time Warner and AO, that got so messy but that was all money being backed, from other stuff. And Sony, granted, they weren't bought by somebody, but they made so much money in so many other arenas that there was money to throw around, which I think part of the problem with what's going on right now is, back in the day, I would get hired to produce a demo for a band from a major on a development deal, and they would come to me and say, hey, we think this band's cool. They got a good look. They got some okay songs. We need them to be built up into what we need to get out there. And they'd throw us whatever, the budget was. I did a demo deal for MCA, got 10 grand from MCA. We spent 2 months in the studio, rewrote the songs, built everything back up, delivered, and they had a deal memo, but not a record deal yet. And once we delivered something the label liked, the label would be like, yeah, we got it now. We're going to sign the band. And those days are gone.
Oh, long time.
The development of artists is gone.
Yeah, you do the development on Logic. You do the development on your laptop's version of
the
Pro
label
Tools.
doesn't have the money now to develop artists.
Well, what a lot of people tend to forget is that one of the biggest indies ever was Island Records. That was a little indie label, Chris Blackwell, and it was, basically he was signing what he wanted when he wanted. And then they signed this Irish band called U2, and bingo, it was off. You know what I mean? It was
then all the majors came in and swooped in to give them.
That's right.
I worked for an indie label in the 90s that we were a dance label, putting out, dance hits. And, as soon as we broke the charts with one of our artists, we had the doors get knocked down we signed with RCA.
Yeah, because they want a piece of the action, man.
Right. But they gave us a lot of money. I mean, they allowed us to develop a lot more acts because they were giving us, it's a business partnership.
Right, and if you go, and we're going to go across the pond here, and we'll throw it over to Mike, the Smiths, the Strokes, these are on Rough Trade, all right? Obviously, the Strokes are a little bit later, but the Smiths, Factory, which is, the Manchester-based label, Joy Division, Happy Mondays, these are independent labels smashing this stuff out. Now, would Joy Division have got signed to EMI in the United States? Probably not. And there you go, right? So you've got the indie labels going, we'll throw some money at it. Which they did, and thank you very much indeed. They made a fortune. So Joy Division, from that moment onwards, Factory Records just grew and grew and grew. The same with Mute, Depeche Mode. Who'd have thought this little electronica band from Surrey or wherever they are in England would be absolutely filling arenas in the United States? Their deal was probably like 15 grand. Get in, get out. We make it, release a couple of songs, and if a couple stick, thank you very much indeed. They are massive to this day. These little labels gave opportunities to bands that in reality the bigger labels would have just laughed at. What do you think, Mike?
Well, I think things like Joy Division probably would have got picked up. That said, I think they probably would have been overproduced in the States, especially around that time period where they'd have come out, sounding a lot cleaner, I guess, which would probably lose part of the charm. Would things like, say, Happy Mondays a bit down the line, would they have got signed? Almost certainly not. I mean, and then, of course, you maybe look at things like, who was it that picked up Oasis again back in the day? Because I know they were
Creation.
Yeah, like EMI is not picking up Oasis, are they?
Well, they are if they want a Beatles.
But I mean, in general, it was a few louts down a pub, wasn't it? Was the story that when they were picked up.
But you know what? It's quintessentially British, just as Poison were quintessentially the Sunset Strip. These indie labels, and the labels at the time, there was a billion bands that sounded like that band. Whatever had a hit, whether it was Slaughter back in the day or whether it was Poison or whatever, all of a sudden the MTV especially was just inundated and flooded with videos of guys looking exactly the same, sounding exactly the same. And that's where the record labels were blowing it, the major labels, because they were just signing trite. It just didn't matter. They were just like, quick, get it filled, fill that genre now.
I think that's an international conglomerates coming in and swooping in and putting money in, because now you have bean counters making the decisions on who's getting signed. There
you go. You're right.
And that's where the labels lost their independence. They were answering to shareholders, and the bean counters made the decisions on who got signed.
That's absolutely on the money, and you knew that was happening because as soon as one of those bigger bands, let's just say at the time when Poison, I'm going to use them as an example because they were really signed on the back of all those glam bands, and they weren't great, but you know what? They had massive hits in America. As soon as the flame started to die down, every band that was signed on the back of that style and that look and that sound were dropped, gone overnight.
Some of them didn't even get to make their first record.
That's right. And what happened was you got the companies, you get companies like Frontiers, you go, all right, all of those bands now have no deal. We're going to go in and we're going to offer them $5K or $10K to go and make a record. And they're going to make it. You know why? Because they're going to get product out, because we are as big as a massive label with an independent feel. Frontiers have opened up the doors for a lot of bands that the doors were closed to. What do you think?
Oh, totally, man. I mean, there's so many bands like Tora, and there's so many, everybody's there, Trickster. I mean, all those bands, they were done.
Oh, enough's enough. Enough's
enough too. I mean, and now there was an opportunity for them.
What about, Mike, what about bands in the UK with regards to like Happy Mondays and... Yeah, are they still making music?
Happy Mondays, I wouldn't, for those guys specifically, I wouldn't actually know. It's not like I was a massive fan, and I think the last time I saw anything about them was when Shaun Ryder was on I'm a Celeb, or one of their other guys decides to run for Parliament every. They're more of a meme at this point than they are actually a band. They're not the only ones to go that way, are they? And those guys were pilled up to high heaven, so it's amazing that they're as sane as they are.
Sure.
But I mean, yeah, I mean, indies do keep a few things alive. I mean, you look at say bands like the Libertines, and there's no way that they'd have actually had any existing with the way that Doherty behaved if it was just them being on Virgin EMI, like no, so there's things like that as well that they are indies are propping everything up, but.
I mean, looking at some of the research, and let's swing to indies right now. I mean, I've been doing a lot of reading on it because I work in the music business. I'm trying to figure out a way to skin that cat too. Everybody is. The business is in disarray right now, and indies are starting to definitely make some headway here. I mean, they just did a research thing. 36% of the U.S. music market was sold through indie labels. $2.3 billion in 2018.
Wow.
And some of the big ones, it's interesting. I mean, it's definitely not a rock and roll thing. I mean, Cash Money was the number one, and they did about 130 million. And that's Lil Wayne, Drake, Nicki Minaj.
Yeah.
Concord Music Group was second at about 120 million. And they're interesting because they've done the whole thing with Starbucks and have like McCartney and Joni Mitchell and John Mellencamp, and they're doing a lot of their distribution. Disney Music Group at number 3 at 192 million. I don't know how they consider Disney Music Group an indie. Maybe they're not part of the big four.
That's a joke right there.
Well, me and Chuck were talking about this just before we got on the podcast. It's a company that owns most of media at this point.
Yep.
And then you got Big Machine, which is, I mean, they're Taylor Swift's last label. And then you got BMG as fifth, and Bertelsmann, I mean, that was a major label. That was RCA Records. And so, but I know they sold the assets off they sold off most of the stuff to Sony.
Yeah.
In 2008, so maybe they're trying to get back at it. Rock Nation, which is Jay-Z's label, was sixth. Entertainment One, E1 was seventh, and that's interesting because I didn't know this. Their main music feed is EMP Label Group, which is Elpson Music Production, which is David Elpson from Megadeth.
Yeah,
that's his label. And then Beggars is still in the play. They've got 4AD and Rough Trade and Matador, Glassnote. They've got Churches and Childish Gambino, Secondhand Serenade. So there's big names on these indie labels. I mean, and then you've got Epitaph, which has always been the indie punk label, and Curb, which is indie country. That kind of goes out on other stuff. But so these 10 labels are driving 36% of the U.S. market share of music sales.
That's a nice chunk, isn't it? With regards,
it's not surprising though. When you're looking at something that's considered a bit niche, it's quite often there's a specialist label for that that's going to be considered indie, and that's taken us outside of rock and things as well. But I mean, you look at things like grime in the UK, for example. That's not on. Well, I suppose it is now on what we consider major record labels. But you go back a couple of years when the likes of Stormzy and stuff were just first coming out. They weren't getting signed to major labels.
Well, that boy Stormzy, he's done all right for himself. He headlined, and this is always mind-blowing to me, headlined Glastonbury and kicked its ass. All right, guys, if I can just take it back again to where we started this, we go back into the indie side. Chuck, you've got some interesting insight into the Apple situation, right?
Yeah, Apple distribution chain is obviously changing to the point where, like, you have Apple kind of swooping in on the independent artists. Back in, 2016?
Yeah.
Frank Ocean put out his last record on Def Jam Universal. The next day, he released a song with his partnership with Apple and a multi-million-dollar deal that he had secured with Apple, and which pissed off the music industry because now Apple was swooping in on artists, and the music industry fought back by saying we're not going to allow exclusives through Apple Music, and we're not going to. Even they talked about pulling their artists from Apple Music. But now they took some time away from that, and now Apple just did a multi-million-dollar deal with the French rap act PNL. Apple's going to be doing all kinds of different co-branding, and the band's an indie band, not even indie label, just an indie artist.
Yeah.
And now these guys in their first week of French sales, they moved 113,000 units of their first single.
That's huge anywhere, but in France, that's massive.
Yeah, they said it's equivalent to about 500,000 American sales.
Woo!
So
yeah, well, the population's 5 times larger, so that makes sense.
yeah, that's exactly why. But that's so it's interesting where we're heading. I mean, is Apple going to become a record label? Which everybody's always questioned that, and they have bought a couple labels that have kind of flown under the radar. But another thing to look at is how are artists going to make money as indies? And the one thing I had read an article about that really was interesting because I'm into gaming and I follow Twitch and my kid's a Fortnite player and I follow Epic Games and the amount of money that's in gaming and how these guys are making it. There's a thing that Epic Games does, the Fortnite creator, that because most people follow the streaming content players who just do content creation. And what Epic did is they gave these guys a creator code. And what these guys do is when they're streaming their gameplay, they're like, hey, make sure you support, content creator code Ninja or whoever the big guys are. And when you go into Epic and buy stuff, that money goes to the content creator, or
Wow.
a part does. So somebody had said like, hey, because a lot of bands now are using Patreon and other ways. They're saying, hey, buy our record and then also support us at our Patreon page and just donate money to us because we're an independent band and we need the money. And it seems to be working for some artists. But, this article I read was tapping into, can artists do a creator code kind of thing? Is that the future where an artist says, hey, when you buy our album, type in this creator code or this artist code, and we'll make money back. We'll make more money back from that.
That's a really, really good idea. I mean, I'm just listening to you. I know nothing about gaming. I know it's come a long way from Pac-Man and Space Invaders, but to follow on with that kind of Patreon sort of scheme, I think it's a great idea for bands.
I think people are looking at the gaming industry because the gaming industry was huge years ago because the game developers made millions or billions.
Yes.
Now the content creators, with the advent of Twitch and Mixer and YouTube streaming, are now you take a guy like Ninja, who's the #1 Fortnite player out there. I mean, this guy's 30 years old. He's pulling in, from what I have read, close to $1 million a month.
What?
Oh yeah, and it's not including his multi-million-dollar Red Bull deal. And I mean, at the end of the day, a content creator playing a game is kind of like a band.
And let's not forget that they're clearly ripping off the exclusivity thing from the games industry. I mean, that's been something people have moaned about in gaming for years.
Yeah,
and wonder where Apple got the idea.
Yeah, Apple probably just ganked that right from the gaming industry. So I think maybe the music industry needs to look deeper at the gaming industry and how money is being generated. I mean, it's insane amounts of money. I mean, this weekend is the Fortnite World Cup in New York. Dude, the giveaway prize, $30 million.
For the winner?
For spread across the winners,
Wow.
I think everybody who wins the thing is $3 million. And we're talking about some of these kids playing are 14 years old.
Jeez.
I mean, they gave away $30 million total to all. I mean, there was kids making sub-finals. I mean, I watched a kid online. He was like 12 years old. He won $56,000. His mom was freaking out behind him.
That's a lot of gummy bears.
Yeah, I mean, but so there's so much money there. I think the record industry gets stuck in its old ways.
Well, it's fat cats playing at being entertainers, you see.
Yeah, we need young blood, and that's where the independent stuff I think is awesome because we've got a lot of young guys starting independent record labels. So we need a new thought process.
You think that maybe the bands themselves then need to be being pushed to do more content, as it were? That's not necessarily putting out an album, but more time talking, especially if they're doing things like Patreon. More time talking directly to the fans and stuff like that. I know some people are, but I mean everybody in general.
I mean, I watch gaming with my kid all the time. It's just the way that it's a thing that we do. And we watch Ninja play. Ninja plays with Brendan Urie at least once a week, the singer from Panic at Disco. He's a huge Fortnite guy. I mean, tonight you have the Fortnite Pro-Am competition. It's Ninja and Marshmello are the team. So there's, they're really bringing the music guys in. I mean, Matt Heffy, the singer from Trivium. All right, so Matt Heffy from Trivium, he plays games online on Twitch. I've caught him playing Fortnite. Caught him playing other games. So, and then you've got now the new Call of Duty. Scott, what's his name from Avenged Sevenfold's a character in it.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean they've always had the thing with those games though. I remember was it Modern Warfare 2 or was it Black Ops where like the end trailers, you had like an animated Avenged Sevenfold playing over the credits. Like I don't know, I think the developers have got like a soft spot for them or something.
Hey, listen, that is a big way for bands to make cash too. Let's not forget that. Not just the games, it's the underscore, it's the music in the background, it's the gold mine.
Oh yeah, entirely. And but the thing is, so what we're kind of thinking is maybe in this modern age is that you can't just be a musician anymore. You have to be a complete entertainer using the other channels as well.
I agree 100%. I mean, it sucks, but yeah, I guess you got to do what you got to do to pay the bills. And I mean, if it's content creation and cross pollination, I guess that's a good thing.
Yeah, and look at it this way. This way, we might actually get the proper rock star back. Because if you're forced to be an outgoing and entertaining personality, then maybe that can be grown.
You tell that to Liam Gallagher.
Let's watch Liam Gallagher play video games.
Yeah, I can't wait. He's like, oh, I don't think so. No. Chuck, I got a story that you reminded me of this morning. The doomed Woodstock 50 Festival is apparently back on. And it's moved venues. Washington, is that right?
Yep.
What? Who's playing that? That's what I want to know. I'm pretty sure at this point everybody's gone, no, we're out. The money isn't there. It's time to move on. Chuck, is this real or is it just a vicious rumor that's going around?
No, they're saying they confirmed with the New York Times that they're going to. They've offered. It's not like locked down, but they've offered to put it on there. The only thing they need to now do is lock up the artists. And I think since this is about 40 minutes away from the original site, most of the contracts with the people that were signed are null and void, like Halsey, The Killers, Jay-Z, Chance the Rapper. I don't know if their contracts are going to be valid.
Yeah. And is this the Merriweather Post Pavilion Center, right? This is the one that we're talking about, the gig in Washington. Have they moved it there? Yeah, I mean, I've actually been lucky enough to play that venue maybe 4 times. I've played it with a couple of festivals there. It's a nice venue. It's it's the outdoor sort of pavilion. It's very, very controlled. It will be nothing like the original Woodstock, that I can promise you. And the whole premise of this festival is to be, it's 50 years since the original Woodstock. This is so far removed from the original Woodstock, you wouldn't get your breath. So you're right. I wondered if those original contracts for the Killers and Halsey and people like that, are they going to be valid? Probably not.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're the artist that cancels, people are gonna, it's not good PR, is it? Let's be fair here. Like,
not good PR. Woodstock 50 has been scrapping for the last 6 months. We're on. We're off. We're suing the guys who gave us the money. The guys suing the money is suing Woodstock. It's an absolute
They
disaster.
just need to put it to sleep, man. I
agree.
Think they're ruining the Woodstock name.
Okay, but here's the question, and correct me if I'm wrong, because obviously I don't pay that much attention to Woodstock, as the viability of going is it'd be an astronomical cost. But the tickets have already been sold, right?
No, they didn't actually. They didn't go
that far.
That's right. They never went on. It was supposed to have been Memorial Day. In the US, they were going on. There was the big lead up, and it was supposed to be that day that they would go on. There was always a time constraint here that all of a sudden it got moved, and then all of a sudden it got moved. Then they were falling out. I mean, the whole thing, and Chuck, you just nailed it, mate. Put it to bed. Sometimes the memory is far better than the actual understanding of what's going on here. The first Woodstock, peace and love. Thank you very much indeed. The second Woodstock, full of mud, fights, and beer. This Woodstock, an absolute travesty.
Yeah, I mean, and it just shows where we're at. I mean, I listen to all kinds of music, and I love all kinds of music, but I just look at the lineup of I love Halsey, but the Killers, Jay-Z, it just doesn't ring Woodstock to me.
Miley Cyrus.
Glastonbury's the same these days, though.
That's why they got to just put it to sleep. They don't. They should start a new festival. God knows there's enough of them out there.
Yeah.
Well, all festivals this is happening with. You look at Glastonbury's the same now. It's and as much as I don't dislike Stormzy, it's not really Glastonbury. At least if you're to take what you're in the same way that we're looking at Woodstock through these rose-tinted hippie glasses. Nice. But then the reality is as well, though, you look at, say, and I don't know if anyone in the States is really going to know these ones, but say you take Leeds and Reading, that used to be a proper rock festival.
Great festivals.
Yeah, these days it's an indie-cindy package holiday for Instagram.
Well, you got to remember bands like The Who. Live in Leeds, that was the loudest concert in the world for a long time. Those were, Mike, and you just nailed it. Those were, again, the rose-colored glasses. They were rock and roll shows. Reading Festival, Queen, Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, all those bands played the Reading Festival. And as a kid, I went to maybe 3 or 4 of them. It was dirty, it was grimy, and it was rock and roll.
I still see a lot of rock bands. I think those two probably have more of a lineup that maybe leads to it. I mean, times have changed. The bands have changed. I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's just because we're snobby music assholes and we want to see what we want.
I don't know, man. 50 Cent did, Leeds and Reading 10 years ago. At that point, it's no, that's not a rock festival anymore. Stop pretending.
No. And if they sell it as a rock, I mean, this year you had Foo Fighters, A Day to Remember,
the
Distillers, and then you had 1975, Royal Blood.
To be fair, Reading and Leeds have made something of an attempt to go back to,
but then they do. They do have the one day where, the Sunday was Post Malone, 21 Pilots, Billie Eilish. I mean, they kind of went with the hip radio.
Yeah. Also remember that if we go back to the Woodstock Festival, if it happens, which it won't, Jay-Z, he brings a band. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Jay-Z live, but that is a show. It's a rock band playing some kick-ass songs. And he may be rapping over the top a bit, but man, that band can play. So to me, you close your eyes, it's a rock band, guys. It really is. And obviously, Miley Cyrus, she can bring it too. I mean, she may have little Miley. No, Miley is quite raunchy, and Miley brings a rock band with her to play those gigs. So times are a-changing, but I guess you're still going to a quote-unquote rock concert if you're Mike's age. What are you, 17, Mike, or something? I can't remember. But if you're a young fella, these are the new rock bands. Maybe I'm wrong.
No, I mean, I think some of these just aren't considered that way. And, like I was saying, is that it does attract a different crowd. I've been to them 10 years apart. And I know you can sort of go, oh, you're getting older. And it's yeah, okay, I am. But, we're talking 16 through to 26 here. We're not talking about, going when you're in your 40s or even if I was going now, and the crowd have changed quite drastically. And like I said, the difference is you've got people that basically don't give a flying shit about the actual music, probably don't know who 90% of the actual bands are, and okay, like I said, I'm probably sounding like a bit of a snob here, but it's true. People are going for Instagram pictures and a package holiday rather than having any interest in the music. I know that's part of a festival. But I just think the percentages have driven more that way over the last 10 years. I mean, look at Glastonbury, man. Most people who actually like the music that it's supposed to be there can't afford to go.
No, you're right, and it's crazy. And you actually just said the golden phrase, getting older. Let me just throw this one at you both today. Born today, July 26, 1943, Mick Jagger. 900 years old, sorry.
Born the joke that keeps on giving there, Tony.
Right, exactly. The same can be said of born today, July 26, 1949, Queen drummer Roger Taylor. How about this one, Chuck? You'll like this one. 1961, today, Gary Cherone.
Oh, wow.
Singer with Extreme, and of course, for a tiny, tiny while, Van Halen. By the way, I'm gonna run that one at you, Chuck. What did you think of him in Van Halen, by the way?
I'm the one person on the planet that actually liked that record.
I thought he was great too.
I didn't love it. I thought it was interesting. I mean, Van Halen to me is David Lee Roth. I'm sorry for all the Van Hagar fans out there. I mean, it's good stuff.
Yeah.
But that's my asshole side of me that is elitist, a Van Halen elitist.
Well, it's always tough for the guy taking over the guy. I promise you, I've been there a couple of times. it's a tough one, but hey, rock and roll. We're all getting older. We're all trying to hold on. Can I say thank you to Chuck? As always, mate, you're a superstar. Thank you very much, sir.
No, not a problem.
Big Mike over there in England. I'd like to say thank you very much for you too, sir. You sound very British today, by the way.
Oh, really? I shall have to go and have some tea then.
Yes. Oh, have a beer. It's much easier. Just want to say thank you to everybody for listening today. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And hey, why don't you leave a review? You can follow us on iHeartRadio, iTunes Podcast, Google Play, Spotify Podcast, InTune Radio, and Stitcher. Love you guys. Follow us. See you next week.